So typhoid fever, what is it? I don't know. Well, let me tell you. It's an infection that's caused by bacteria. It's usually spread by water or food that's contaminated by fecal matter. And I know it sounds gross, but look, it's real. And it can hide like under your fingernails, on your hands, or your skin. And then, you like wipe your nose. Next thing you know, it's in your body. The disease would begin with like a headache. You would get fever, and then you would get like bloody, foul-smelling diarrhea. Then usually like a rash would form, followed by a high fever, which for some could lead to like death. Now at the time, typhoid was terrifying because there was no cure and a vaccine wasn't discovered until 1911. Plus, like antibiotics, they weren't even discovered until 1949. So if you got this, you just had to like hope for the best and wait it out, Now, of the 11 people that were staying at that summer home, 6 of them got sick. It was like mainly the workers, but not Mary. She never got it. And in fact, she appeared quite healthy. Like she showed no symptoms related to typhoid, which is kind of weird because like everyone around her got it. Now it was said that Mary was a stout woman with a robust, healthy appearance. She had dark hair, often pulled back or styled in a simple manner, with a round face and a strong, determined expression. Now at the time, typhoid fever was really associated with poverty and filth. So, this town, Oyster Bay, it was very affluent and they never had like an outbreak of typhoid before. So when the wealthy Warren family home had typhoid going around, it made no sense to them. They're like, we're rich. This doesn't happen to us, And like, not only was it deadly, it was low-key embarrassing. They're like, oh my God, we are not poor. This is not okay. When the owners of the house found out about the outbreak, they freaked out. The owner of the house was worried that none of the well-to-do people would want to rent this fancy home if they knew people like got typhoid there. So he hired people to come and inspect where the typhoid may have come from before word got out. Apparently the house had been a wedding present, and if they couldn't locate the source of the outbreak, it's possible that the house would be declared a health hazard and then burned. So eventually, the homeowner was introduced to Dr. Soper, who technically wasn't a doctor, but he was a sanitary engineer. One newspaper described him as a, quote, a doctor to sick cities, end quote. Oh, yeah, I don't know how he got the doctor title, but he did. But whatever. So they call him up. So Dr. Soper, he comes out to the Warren home and he gets to work. He's like, I'm going to figure out where this typhoid came from. They check every corner, the water, they check everywhere. So he does a little digging. And then Dr. Soper finds out that the Warrens had recently changed cooks. The most recent cook was Mary Mallon. And it was odd because now she was missing. She was nowhere to be found. And she had left with like no notice or explanation. She was just gone. It was like, oh, that's weird. Now, Dr. Soper is like putting the pieces together and he's like, the cook was really the only new thing that was introduced into the household. And this cook handled food, which all the people who got sick had eaten this food. So, Dr. Soper, after some time, it took him a while, he believed he had found the culprit. It was this Mary Mallon person. Now, after this, he was determined to find her before she got anyone else sick. So meanwhile, Mary was bouncing from job to job around New York. She was usually getting hired for like a few weeks or months, then moving on to like the next gig. At one point, Mary started working for a family on Park Avenue in New York City. And pretty soon, 2 cases of typhoid were reported. A maid and the daughter for the family Mary worked for. Now the girl, the daughter, she would end up dying within just a few days. And word gets back to Dr. Soper. Now when he hears about this death, most people would be like, oh, that's sad. But he was like, oh my God, what? Typhoid? Where? He knew in his head that this was probably Mary's doing. So Dr. Soper, he hops in his little car. I don't know what he does, but he gets his butt over to that family home on Park Avenue as soon as he could. So he just shows up like out of the blue, knocks on the door, and asked to speak to Mary Mallon. So she answers the door, and right off the bat, Dr. Soper is like accusing Mary of causing the typhoid, getting people sick, and even killing someone. I don't know, maybe Dr. Soper thought like she would just cooperate or like apologize. I don't know what he thought, but to his surprise, Mary was actually, she was pissed. She was pissed off. I mean, could you imagine you're working at your place of work, and then someone shows up and starts making wild accusations that you killed someone in front of your employer? You're like, hey, whoa, now is not the time, you know? So she was mad. She's like, what the fuck? So this guy is just like making wild accusations, calling her a killer, and then he was demanding samples of her urine, feces, and blood. Again, I'd be like, excuse me, who are you? Like, I don't know you. So Mary, she doesn't like say anything. She instead grabs a carving fork and then lunges at Soper, who I guess just like turns right around and he just gets the fuck out of there. So, I mean, Dr. Soper, he left the meeting empty-handed, and Mary was now feeling angry, scared, paranoid, and probably like a little suspicious of the whole situation. So this first encounter really left Dr. Soper confused. I mean, he thought Mary would comply and like hand herself over. He could not understand why she was so defensive. I mean, to him, he was only trying to offer her good medical attention. So now, after this, in his opinion, Mary was a menace to society. He's mad and he's determined. So Mary, she continues to work at the home on Park Avenue, and Dr. Soper, he knew this. So one night, he like goes to the home and he waited outside. He's like waiting for her to get off of work so he could follow her. Yeah, okay. He's going full stalker. So Mary was walking home, whatever, and she stops at 33rd Street and 3rd Avenue where her boyfriend lived, a man named August Brioff. Now, Brioff was a former policeman, and he honestly, he didn't really have much going on in his life, I guess, based off what I read. I don't know. He drank a lot. He lived in a dirty apartment. He had a dog. And then other than that, he had Mary. Mary would often bring Brioff food and like take care of him. It's kind of sweet. And when Brioff wasn't at home doing nothing, he would spend his days in a saloon around the corner. Now, so remember, Soper like followed her here, and he was watching the situation from outside, like a creep. So I guess he was spying on them for a little bit because Soper takes notice of Brioff hanging at the saloon, and he thought the best way to get to Mary would be through this guy. He's like, yeah, that's my way in. So Dr. Soper, he's like, you know what? I'm going to go make friends with this guy. So one day he goes to the saloon and he becomes friends with Brioff. Now, Soper actually wrote about this encounter and said, quote, I got well acquainted with him. He took me to see his room. I should not care to see another place like it. It was a place of dirt and disorder, end quote. So that's really nice of him, you know. Okay, so that night, Dr. Soper went to the Brioff's home with him, and he decides, like, I'm just gonna wait here until Mary shows up. Well, finally, Mary walks in, and right away, she was pissed. She was angry when she saw Soper waiting there for her. I mean, what was he doing? Like, stalking her? Like, leave me alone. She's like, what is this? What? So once again, like, Soper tried to explain to Mary that he believed that she was giving people typhoid. But Mary, like, refused to hear him out. She never had typhoid. How could she be giving it to people? You know, like, he was incorrect. She had been in perfect health, and she would not allow anyone to come into her home and make such wild accusations about her. So once again, she, I guess, chased Dr. Soper out. So Dr. Soper, he felt like he had no other choice but to take the case to the New York City Health Department. He called Mary a, quote, living culture tube and chronic typhoid germ producer, end quote. That's so sweet. Wow. I mean, like, he doesn't really know for sure, but he really went for it, you know? He was quick to tell everyone how big and strong Mary was. And it was almost like he wanted to have an excuse for like letting this woman chase him away multiple times. Here's how he described her to other people. Mary had a good figure and might have been called athletic had she not been a little too heavy. She prided herself on her strength and endurance. Okay. Mary was about 5'6", so that's the monster of an athlete we're talking about here. I didn't look up how tall Soper was. He must have been, a little bit, maybe shorter. I don't know. But the New York City Health Department decided to send another doctor to help Soper, a woman named Dr. S. Josephine Baker. I know, I was like, what? Crossover episode? But no, there's no relation to the American-born French dancer, singer, and actress Josephine Baker, who we've done a Dark History episode on. No relation, not the same person, just the same name. What are the odds, huh? But they thought, the health department, they thought that like maybe sending a woman might get through to Mary more so than a man. If a woman came up to you and was like, hey, I want to talk, you might listen. A man, you're like, get the fuck away from me. But they failed to mention to Dr. Baker that Mary might be a little difficult, you could say. So Dr. Baker, she's very excited. She's like, I'm going to Park Avenue to, collect some samples from this Mary woman. So she goes to the home, and right off the bat, Mary once again slammed the door in her face. So the next day, a horse-drawn ambulance from the health department was sent to Mary's workplace. Very dramatic. Then, I guess like 3 policemen, they show up, and they surround the house, and they're trying to like block any of the possible escape routes. So they're doing that, and Dr. Baker, she rang the doorbell. Mary, once again, she answers. She sees them again, and she tried to slam the door, but there was a cop with Dr. Baker. The cop like put his foot inside the door, so she couldn't shut it. You know what I'm saying. So I guess at this point, Mary had turned around. She bolted to the kitchen and like disappeared. She was gone. So Dr. Baker and the officer, they run into the house. They're chasing after her. They are asking the other workers in the home, like, where'd she go? Where'd she take off to? But they had no answers. So they're looking around. They search the closets, the basement, the living quarters, but they just like could not find her. They would continue searching for 3 hours, calling for backup, but they got nowhere. So I guess Miss Mary, she had like run out the door. She hopped a fence and she hid in an outside water closet in the backyard of a neighboring house. And she was just hiding in there. Well, the police and Dr. Baker, they eventually find her. And she was like trapped in this room. She had nowhere else to go, So they got her cornered. And according to Dr. Baker, Mary had fought, she struggled, and she cursed while she tried to explain that Dr. Baker was trying to explain that she only wanted specimens and then she can go back home. Like, that's all we need. So Mary again is refusing to comply with these people. So a policeman just ends up picking her up and they put her in the ambulance. And it was said that Dr. Baker like sat on top of her the whole way to the hospital so she wouldn't escape.